It is always a pleasure to come back to this campus, the campus of one of the most prestigious educational institutions in our country, rated among all the universities in the Philippines as, in the entire nationwide survey, rated number 9, and in Manila and the rest of the National Capital Region, rated number 5, the great Adamson University. Today I was diagnosed with hypertension, and you know that like most of your parents, when they are having an attack, I was ordered by the doctor to stay at home and try and keep quiet. But I decided to come anyway. My speech today will be a little bit longer than usual because in addition to the topic that you have assigned to me, I wish to say a few words as a constitutional scholar on the present controversy concerning the cybercrime law. But unfortunately, we'll have to forego the question and answer. Maybe you can invite me some other time when I am more healthy. After the photo opportunity, I will have to leave immediately so that my family will not be very concerned about my health. So that is what we shall do today. But first, I want to ask you a few questions. Ito, unang pagtatanong. Anong pinagpapareho ng sperm at mga politiko? Anong pinagpapareho ng sperm at ng mga politiko? Pareho silang may 1 in a million chance na maging totoong tao. Ang pag-ibig natin ay hindi parang Facebook. Pwedeng i-like, pwede rin mag-comment, pero hindi dapat i-share. Mabuti pa si Sleeping Beauty. Nagising lang, may boyfriend na agad. Samantalang ikaw, wala pa rin kahit luwa na ang mata mo. Ang crush, parang math problem. Kung hindi mo makuha, titigan mo na lang. Pupunta ka ba sa gym? Kasi feeling ko, mag-workout tayo. Ang pagmamahal ko sa iyo ay parang bilbil. Pilit kong tinatago, halata pa rin. Gulong ka ba? Kasi ang sarap ingudngod ng paikot-ikot. Kasi ang sarap ingudngod ng paikot-ikot ang mukha mo sa lupa. Ang relasyon ay parang gubat. Madalas may ahas. Sino sa inyo dito naliligaw ngayon sa kasalukuyan? Pick-up line para sa mga naliligaw. Kung isa akong joke, gusto ko yung mapipikon ka para naman seryosohin mo ako. Para sa crush mong lalaki. Wow! Saan gawa ang t-shirt mo? Gawa ba yan sa boyfriend material? Finally, taga Adamson ka ba? Bakit? Kasi nagit mo ang puso ko na parang soaring falcon. And then, just before we discuss the cybercrime law, very briefly, mga online activities na dapat ituring na cybercrime. Number 1, wrong grammar. Number 2, premature campaigning ng mga epal politicians televisions. Number 3, photo albums na panay mukha mo lang ang laman. Hindi porque bagong hairdo mo, magpo-post ka na ng 100 pictures ng sarili mo. Pwede bang kasuhan ng cybercrime ang kaaway mo tuwing magpo-post siya ng bagong profile picture? Nakaka-offend kasi. Illegal dapat ang pagmumukha mo. Ladies and gentlemen, as a constitutional law scholar, please allow me to start with my belief that the present cybercrime law is unconstitutional. The prefix cyber relates to the culture of computers, information technology, the internet, and virtual reality. The term cybercrime refers to criminal activities carried out by means of computers or the internet. Just like any other human activity, the internet carries with it new avenues of illegal behavior. The internet makes it easier to commit certain crimes such as dissemination of pornography, copyright infringement, and defamation. Kung minsan, nagtataka ako kung anong ginagawa ng mga kasamahan ko sa Senado dahil hindi naman nakikinig, hindi naman nakikisali. Pupunta sila sa lounge, nanonood sila ng TV. Sa palagay ko siguro may mga dala-dala yung mga laptop o kaya mga tablet. Baka nanonood ng pornography. Well, that's how easy it is to access pornography. The internet also gives rise to crimes exclusive to the internet, such as computer hacking and misuse. And the internet can make certain crimes complicated because they could be illegal in some countries but not in others. Computer misuse was dramatically demonstrated in 2000 when a Filipino hacker attacked and destroyed data in 45 million computers. Filipino hacker. He created a virus that the media called the love bug because it used the subject line, "I love you," in the emails that carried it. The estimated cost in damages was $10 billion. The Filipino was never punished because the Philippines at that time had no law criminalizing computer misuse. Accordingly, in 2001, the Council of Europe drafted the Cybercrime Convention in Budapest. The Philippines is not yet a party to this treaty. If we become a party, the Philippines would be duty-bound to adopt a Cybercrime Prevention Act. But the Philippine Congress has already anticipated future global pressure to end computer abuse. Kaya, bandang huli, magiging party rin tayo to that convention and it will become our duty as a party to pass the Cybercrime Act. Kaya inunahan lang natin, nauna lang tayo sa kinakailangan sa ating globalizing economy. In the United States, there are several laws to protect the public from computer misuse, notably the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and the 1996 Telecommunications Act. Although the U.S. considers internet gambling to be illegal, this year 3 bills were filed to legalize internet gambling in America. You see, even in the United States, people are confused what to do with the new technology. We have to invent a new grammar, a new vocabulary, and we have in effect to reinvent our entire social engineering process. As economics and business students, you are already aware that cybercrime works a prejudice in e-commerce. Companies with online operations are subject to credit card fraud, identity theft, phishing, PHISHING, and intellectual property crimes. Cybercriminals continue to negatively impact e-commerce. In short, in today's world, cybercrime prevention is a necessity. This is why I was active during the interpolation and amendment periods of the Cybercrime Prevention Act. Unfortunately, I was absent because of hypertension during the voting period. Kita na ninyo, pag hypertension, hindi ako makapunta sa Senado. Pero maski may hypertension, pupunta ako sa Adamson University. Kasi sa tingin ko, mas mataas ang IQ dito. In my humble opinion, the law as presently worded is unconstitutional. In our Constitution, freedom of speech occupies a so-called preferred position. In his immortal argument for, quote, a marketplace of ideas, unquote, the great Justice Holmes wrote, they may come to believe that the ultimate good desired is better reached by free trade in ideas, that the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the computation of the market. Kung meron kang idea, di pumunta ka doon sa palengke ng mga ideas, mga pag-iisipan, para all of these thoughts will collide with each other, at ang pinakamaganda, ang mananalo. That is a so-called marketplace of ideas. In fact, the constitutional provision in our Constitution, on its surface, sounds absolute. Notice this provision in our Constitution. No law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech. Did you notice that? It sounds absolute. But because of the way this provision is worded, I humbly submit that while the general rule is that a law that is passed by Congress and signed by the President is presumed to be constitutional, there is an exception when the law limits free speech. All laws passed by Congress, if you bring it to the Supreme Court, they all enjoy a presumption of constitutionality. It is presumed to be constitutional. The burden of proof is on the person who is assailing the law, but not in the case of freedom of speech. If the law limits freedom of speech, if you bring a case to the Supreme Court will presume that it is unconstitutional. That is my position. Otherwise, there is no point in the language, no law shall be passed abridging so and so. Yan ang kung minsan hindi napapansin ng ating mga abogado o mga nag-aaral ng batas. Akala nila lahat ng laws are presumed to be constitutional. Hindi totoo yun. That is the general rule. The exception is when the law seeks to limit free speech. Then the law either has no presumption of constitutionality or unconstitutionality, or in the extreme, the law is presumed to be unconstitutional. I prefer to view that law as unconstitutional at the start, so that the burden of proof is on the lawmaker who ordered that law. The Cybercrime Act is the law that dangerously limits the growth of the marketplace of ideas. Therefore, it is presumed to be unconstitutional. But in addition, the law is unconstitutional because it uses language that is overbroad and language that is too vague. In other words, it violates what we call in constitutional law the overbreadth doctrine and the vagueness doctrine. What two doctrines? Overbreadth and vagueness. What two doctrines? Overbreadth and vagueness. Now I will explain what is the meaning. The overbreadth doctrine holds that if a law is so broadly written that it deters free expression, then the Supreme Court will strike it down on its face because of its chilling effect. Ibig sabihin, if you try to limit cyber activities, particularly cyber literature or cyber text or any kind of data or information, if you try and limit that by means of a law, but your law is not well written, and it covers so many activities na parang takot ka na galawin ang computer mo, baka mamaya may kasalanan ka pala sa ilalim ng batas, masyado kasi siyang broad, then that law is unconstitutional because it produces a chilling effect on the public. Ayaw na nila magsalita dahil mamaya hindi nila intindi. Dahil sa dami ng listahan din ng mga bawal, natakot na sila. Meron ng chilling effect. That is the overbreadth doctrine. Hindi pa yan masyadong kilala sa ating bansa. Pero sa libro ko, nakalagay yung mga doktrina na iyan, and in one case, the Supreme Court adopted these doctrines. The vagueness doctrine refers to a law that provides a punishment without specifying what conduct is punishable, and therefore the law is void because it violates due process. Ibig sabihin, meron tayong batas na sabi niya, itong mga gawain na ito, labag sa batas. Pero hindi naman niya dinidescribe exactly kung anong ginagawa mo. Halimbawa, sabihin lang niya, computer abuse, computer misuse, credit card fraud. Anong ibig sabihin ng mga iyon? That is too vague. So that law becomes unconstitutional because it violates the vagueness doctrine. To summarize, the Cybercrime Act is unconstitutional because it uses language that is too broad and it uses language that is too vague. To put it in another way, this law is unconstitutional because it violates the overbreadth doctrine and the vagueness doctrine. Among the provisions of the Cybercrime Act that are too broad or too vague are Section 4, Paragraph C of Paragraph 4. It makes libel a cybercrime if committed online. Kung magbatikos ka, libel yun. Kung magbatikos ka, halimbawa sa Twitter or sa Facebook or other social media outlets, that's already libel. Section 5. It punishes any person who aids or abets the commission of any cybercrime, even if it is only through Facebook or Twitter. Ibig sabihin, kung may nabasa ka dyan sa internet at nagustuhan mo, dahil batikos nga sa gobyerno o sa isang abusadong opisyal, tapos ni-retweet mo lang, o kaya by any other method, you send it to have a more expanded audience, then you're aiding and committing, and you'll therefore be guilty under the Cybercrime Act. Eh kung may marinig ka sa palengke, at inulit mo, na batikos kung kanino man, at inulit mo, hindi ka naman guilty ng libel lang. Bakit sa ating Cybercrime Act? Iyan, simply repeating things. Nag-comment ka, nag-like ka, nag-share ka, guilty ka na. Because you're aiding and abetting. Pwedeng i-interpret yan in that way. That is why I'm saying it is too vague. Sabihin mo kung ano bang ibig mo talagang binabawal dyan. You mean just to retweet it? Just to comment on it? Just to share it? Just to put like on it? That is why I insist that the law should be struck down as unconstitutional. Section 6. It adopts the entire penal code. Ang sabi ng batas natin ngayon, kung ano man yung krimen sa ating penal code, krimen din yon. But the penalty shall be 1 degree higher. Eh bakit kung mag-libel ka, 4 years lang ang penalty mo? Bakit kung sa internet mo gagawin, penalty mo 1 degree higher, let's say maybe 6 years? Bakit ganun? Anong diferensya sa real life at sa virtual life? What is the difference? Libel is libel anywhere, so the penalty should be the same. In fact, there are some people who think that when you commit libel, if you are charged and found guilty, your penalty should only be a fine. You should only be made to pay the other party, but you should not go to jail because you want to protect free speech. Eh, ako nga, simulang pumasok ko sa politika, sarit-sarit ng sinungaling at chismis at intrigang inabot ko. Kaya lang, basta may sinabi sila, sinasabihan ko lang, at ikaw rin, double. Section 7. It makes the same act punishable, both under the Penal Code and the Cybercrime Act. Ang ibig niyang sabihin, isa lang ang ginawa mong mali, pero pwede kang i-prosecute both under the Penal Code and then under the Cybercrime Act. So for the same act, you can be punished 2 times. That is a violation of the so-called double jeopardy prohibition in our Constitution. And finally, Section 19. It authorizes the Department of Justice to restrict or block access to computer data which is found to be prima facie violative of the new law. Section 19 is the so-called takedown clause. Eh kung nagbasa lang pala somebody there in the Department of Justice, at sa tingin niya, masama yon, lalo na kung gagamitin niyang clause, it endangers national security. Or even worse, if it says, it endangers public interest. Ibig mo sabihin, even without going to court, even without any evidence, pwede lang niya sukat i-block ang access sa iyong computer data. What kind of provision is that? It violates our sense of justice. Under the due process clause, no person shall be held accountable without notice or hearing. Eh, biro mo, wala kang notisya, wala kang paglilitis, hindi ka man narinig, basta sukat niya i-block. That Section 19 is the most dangerous provision of all. For these reasons, I predict that the Supreme Court will strike down the Cybercrime Act as unconstitutional. Otherwise, it will be a black day for freedom of speech in this country. I have finished with the Cybercrime Act. Now I'm going to inflict on you the punishment of listening to me on economics and business. I'm trying very hard to use everyday language so that we'll all understand each other. Because business and economics, although they're one of my favorite topics, is a very technical subject. My speech here is entitled, How to Fix the Philippine Economy. Palagi na lang ganyan ang istorya ng ating bansa. Kailangan lumabas tayo ng ating bansa para sumikat tayo masenso. Kung dito ka lang, wala akong mangyayari sa iyo. Malakad ka lang mamaya eh. Na-hold up ka, na-kidnap ka, na wala kang kasalanan. Naalala ko tuloy, when I was very young, I became an RTC judge in Quezon City. I was the youngest RTC judge in the entire Philippines. And one time I was trying a case of robbery. And the accused was on the witness stand. Sabi ng abogadong kontra niya, saan ka nang hold up ka? Saan ka nakaupo doon sa loob ng bus nang tumayo ka nang hold up ka? Sabi ng akusado, hindi naman ako hold upper eh. Pickpocket lang ako. Yan ang problema sa ating bansa. Parang wala tayong gobyerno, kanya-kanya na lang sa kagustuhan nila, gagawa nila, mga personada nila, hala. Mas, alam mo ba, para magpulis ka, kailangan may bachelor's degree ka? Did you know that? You cannot be a policeman or a policewoman unless you have a bachelor's degree. Pero pwede kang tumakbong presidente ng Pilipinas o senador ng Pilipinas na hindi ka nakatapos ng college. Hindi ka man kailangan pagtapos ng high school. Ganon ang ating batas. Ano class? Wow! Compared to our ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, compared to our ASEAN 5 neighboring countries, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, the Philippines is one of the poorest performing countries in terms of governance. Eh, dami palang marunong dyan sa ating Senado halimbawa o kaya sa ating House of Representatives. Bakit tayo ganun? One of the poorest performing countries in terms of governance. Di mga gago yan sila? O kaya magnanakaw ng pera? O kaya magnanakaw na gago? Things speak for themselves. By their fruit you shall know them. You find that in the Bible. Pagkatapos, di pa sila kontento. Lahat ng graduated na, hindi na sila pwedeng tumakbo dahil sa ilalim ng batas, pwede kang tumakbo 2 beses lamang, tapos hindi ka na pwede. Mag-antay ka ng 3 years, tapos pwede ka na tumakbo muli. Mga anak, our country is the most politically unstable country in ASEAN. We are the most politically unstable country. And our country is the second worst country in terms of control of corruption among the ASEAN 5 countries. Yan ang mga pinagmamalaki nitong mga kandidato na ito, nang dami daw nila nagawa, ang galing daw nila, mga matalino sila, mga pasipag sila, puro sila lahat honest. Kaya kung minsan, pag tumayo sila sa Senado, hindi talaga ako makakapigil. Hinamon ko magsuntukan na lang ako. In terms of changes in perceptions over the past decade regarding corruption, Hong Kong-based PERC, this is the agency that rates the performance of governments. The PERC rated the Philippines the worst in the Asia-Pacific region in 2012 with a grade. The grade range was from 0 to 10, with 0 being the best possible grade and 10 the worst possible grade, and our grade was, guess, 9.35. Pag may tsunami sana, mahuli lahat itong 24 kandidato pagka senador. Parang pag-asa naman tayo. Kasi laki na ginagastos na, saan lang kinakuha pera nila yun? Lalo na sa TV. Do you know in television, you buy 30 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Count, magiging 30 seconds. For every 30 seconds, you have to pay at least 200,000 pesos. Eh, dami nilang TV ngayon pa lang eh. Saan nila kinukuha yung pera? Hindi, hiningi nila, o inutang nila, o nang-kidnap sila, o nagpapakit sila. Basta sigurado mo, pag nanalo yon, babawiin nila yan sa ating kaban. At may interest pa. Kaya walang lisensong gobyerno eh. Dahil umpisada pa lang, ang dami-dami ng perang pinapalabas nila. Eh, natural pa bawiin nila yan. Alangan namang i-donate nila yan. In brief, the Philippines has a credibility problem. As a result, it received and continues to receive the lowest foreign direct investments or FDIs into the country. Walang may gusto mag-invest dito, contrary to all the propaganda you read or hear about. Yet, the country needs a lot of foreign direct investment in order to sustain strong, inclusive growth that we can only dream about at the moment. Despite the hype, foreign investors are not coming here. They are going elsewhere, to Vietnam, to Indonesia, to Thailand, and to other places. According to some economists, the country can sustain a growth of around 4.5%. But that is not good enough. What should be our rate of economic growth, since you are business economics students? Abel? That is correct, yes. The economy needs to grow on a sustained basis at about 7% for a decade to make a difference in the lives of ordinary Filipinos. Why? Because there are simply too many of us. Some 2 million Filipinos are born every year, a great majority in abject poverty. Kaya, tumakbo nga kayo, mga business economics students ng Adamson at iba pang mga universidad dito, para meron naman tayong economist na presidente na kaya niyang umabot sa 7% ang ating GNP growth. Huwag na tayong pumili pa ng iba pang mga profesyon. Ang hanap na lang tayo, basta sinabi ng tao, kaya ko yan, dalhin sa 7%, iboto na natin kaagad. Kaya po nga eh. Maski sinong kandidato pagka-presidente, basta mabigyan ng solusyon ang traffic problem sa Metro Manila, iboto ko yon. Some basic policies. The first basic policy is that the government has to invest more in education, health, and social welfare in order to build a more productive and intelligent workforce. Intelligent workforce. It has to invest heavily in public infrastructure. During the last 12 years, the government has invested very little in public infrastructure. Here I mean hard infrastructure such as roads, bridges, airports, seaports, urban transit systems, irrigation systems, power plants, and so forth and so on. Hard infrastructure will help to expand the capacity of the economy to produce. Historically, we have only spent less than 2% of gross domestic product, the size of the economy. Other countries in dynamic Asia have spent equivalent of 5% or higher for public infrastructure. Palagi tayong huli. 7% ang ating kapitbahay sa ASEAN, tayo 4.5 lang. Sila 5% GDP, tayo 2% lang. If we want to be like our more fast-growing Asian neighbors, we should be spending about 500 billion pesos annually. Not 500 billion for the next 5 years, but 500 billion annually for public infrastructure. That is why the first major challenge for the government is where to get the money to finance social services and public infrastructure. Noon pa, umpisa pa lang ako sa Immigration Commission, sinabi ko na, palaging pagtatanong ng taong bahay, saan tayo kukuha ng pera? Ang sagot ko ay napakadali. Kunin natin ang pera doon sa mga magnanakaw at ikulong natin silang lahat. Ibig sabihin, walang maiiwan yan sa Kongreso. Silang lahat. In fact, merong insane asylum sa Metro Manila. Nawalan sila ng isang inmate na katakas. Hanap na sila dito, hanap na sila doon. Hindi na makita-kita itong taong ito kasi dangerous yan, armed. Tapos sira pang ulo niya. Ngayon, napunta sila sa Senado, ay nandoon yung taong yun. Tinawag ang pangalan niya, nagsabi siya, present. O, saan natin kukunin ng pera? I always said when I was Immigration Commissioner, we just stop corruption, that's it, to get the money. The COA, I think 2 days ago, said our country lost 200 billion pesos in the last fiscal year. That's the Commission on Audit, 200 billion. Bakit ka pa maghanap? Diyan lang sa corruption, ininto mo lang yun, 200 billion kagad kikitain mo. When I first said that when I was Immigration Commissioner, everyone, the politicians said, she's exaggerating. Now the Commission on Audit has confirmed it. Ang dali-dali lang. Palitan niyo ang lahat ng nagnanakaw sa gobyerno. Ang problema, ang pinapalit natin, magnanakaw din. That is a problem really with our country that is, for me, a very simple solution. Just give me license to kill. A recent World Bank Public Expenditure Review recommends increasing public expenditures in priority sectors, meaning education, health, social welfare, and public infrastructure by around 5 to 7% of GDP. That is roughly 500 to 700 billion pesos annually. Well, again, I emphasize the question is, where are we going to get the money? You have to have the courage to fight the crooks in our country that have made us notorious for our so-called culture of corruption. Kung minsan sabi ng ibang mga critics ko, masyado naman siya kung magalit siya. Eh, di ka ba magagalit? Bilyon pa lang ninakaw nila taon-taon? Eh, yan ang nga problema sa ating bansa eh. Walang may tao na may dunong at may tapang na sabihin niya, ihinto rin nyo ang pagnanakaw ninyo. Dahil dyan ang pera, nakalagay dyan, nakatago, nakabaon dyan eh. Tingnan mo ang tirahan ng lahat ng mga kasapit ng Kongreso, Forest Park, Dasmariñas, lahat ng first-class subdivisions. May asawa, ang mga anak nag-eskwela abroad, ang dami nilang kotse, ang dami nilang driver, ang dami ding mga kirida nila. Saan nila kinukuha yun? The second basic policy is that the government should adopt measures that will fix and strengthen our shaky fiscal house. The government has to reform the tax system. Tax effort, which as you all know is defined as taxes as percent of GDP, is around 12.5% to 13%. It peaked in 1997 before the Asian financial crisis. Pataas na sana yung tax collection effort eh. But the person who said that he won over me as president in 1992, kasi alam naman ninyo, nanalo ako dahil sinuportahan ako ng mga kabataan. I won in the voting, but I lost in the counting. That Mr. Ramos and Speaker De Venecia messed up our tax system on their way out. As a result, tax effort went into a free fall. The tax to GDP ratio was a disappointingly low 12% in 2010 and 12.2% in 2011. It should be increased by 5% to bring it back to around 17%. Dapat ganun kataas ang pagkolekta mo. Pagbagsak yan, ibig lang sabihin, naglagay yon, kaya hindi makolekta. Wala kang pera sa kaban. Dahil hindi raw nagbabayad, hindi raw nila makita, hindi raw nila makompute. The third basic policy is that the government should adopt a multi-year budget. Most of the problems in government, poverty, poor literacy, inadequate health care, crumbling infrastructure, peace and order, unfair justice system, and so on, cannot be solved in a year or two. The government should be looking at a multi-year budget system rather than the annual budget process. The executive and Congress should agree on a common agenda for addressing past neglect in infrastructure, education, and health. The executive should admit a medium-term expenditure framework, and Congress should approve it through a joint resolution. The multi-year budget will force the executive to reveal what it intends to do during the incumbency of any administration. The fourth basic policy is that the Philippines should invest heavily in public infrastructure to make up for past neglect and to put the country on a higher growth path. Sadly, the Philippines has not invested enough for a long-term growth. Capital formation has been neglected in the past, averaging around 1/5 of gross national income from 1986 to 1998. This is low by Asian standards. Worse, capital formation has dropped sharply in the last 6 years. You're all familiar with these statistics. A country that does not invest enough cannot be expected to grow rapidly in the future. And there are some unmistakable signs of economic decay, the crumbling infrastructure, and the thinning and unreliable power supply. The fifth basic policy is that the country's political leaders have to fix the dysfunctional political system. What's happening in our economy is going beyond economics. The sad state of the economy now and what appears to be its future trajectory is the result of a flawed political system, rampant rent-seeking, ibig sabihin corruption, and a political and economic elite that has the propensity to resist change. Ay natural, mayaman na kasi sila. Ayaw nilang baguhin yan. Bakit pa nila baguhin? Sila na nakaitaas sa ating lahat. That is why they are so bitter against me. Because they know that I know what they are doing and I know my law. That is why there is a black propaganda campaign against me all the time that I'm in politics. Because I have to be removed. Ang gusto nila, yung hindi nakakaintindi. At tatanggap na lang ng kaparte. Yun, maligaya sila doon. Pero kung mag-ingay ka at mukhang maintindihan mo kung anong ginagawa nila, galit na sila sa iyo, dami ng black propaganda lilitaw. Yan ang problema natin. It is the elite that is choking the Filipino middle class and, needless to say, the lower class. In short, bad politics and the avaricious political and economic elite have triumphed over good economics. Much has been written about constraints to growth, but no one is bold enough to write about the elephant in the house. An elephant in the house, ibig sabihin, a fact that is staring you in the face. Kakagatin ka na lang, hindi mo pa rin nakikita. When bad politicians and their counterparts in the private sector remain satisfied with the status quo, it would be difficult to expect real reform. Basta mga nakakataas sa atin sa ngayon, namumunini sila, nagyayaman sila, makapangyarihan sila, yan ang kalaban natin dahil ayaw nila ng reforma. Bakit pa magreforma? Sila lang hari-hari eh. Kaya hindi tayo makakataas. Hindi natin kayang itaas ang ating middle class at ang ating lower economic classes o masa. Dahil pinipigil nila eh. This cozy relationship between bad politicians and business interests are reflected in many tax incentive laws, old and new economic zones, awards of government contracts large and small, and appointments in key public positions. Oh, ano ngayon ang sagot dito sa mga problemang ito? Do you know? I will just give you a summary. First, reform the tax system. Second, invest for the future. There should be higher and sustained government spending for education, health, and productivity-enhancing public infrastructure. Number 3, embrace meritocracy in government. Dapat pagalingan lang sa gobyerno, hindi palakasan. Kung nag-graduate ka, halimbawa, with honors, di dapat unahin kang i-appoint. Hindi kung sino yung nagkampanya para sa iyo ng halalan, maski gago yun. Magnanakaw, pangit pa. Dapat, anong grado mo sa Adamson? Cum laude ka ba? Magna cum laude ka ba? Yan ang sinasabing meritocracy. Number 4, transform the political system so that competence, public accountability, and good performance are rewarded. Naririnig na ninyo ang mga bagong appointees sa oposisyon sa gobyerno? Ang pagtatanong natin ay, saan siya nag-graduate? Nag-graduate ba siya with honors? Or scholar ba siya? Anong record niya? Nang estudyante siya? Anong record niya? Nang professional na siya? Respetado ba siya ng kanyang mga colleagues in the profession? Kung hindi, that's a political opportunist. So anong mapapala mo dyan? Anong maasahan mo dyan? 5, open up the Philippine economy to foreign ownership of land and foreign ownership of all forms of businesses, including the media. Yun ang problema eh. Ayaw nilang papasukin ng dayuhan, hindi naman sila magaling. Ano ngayon ang pag-aasenso ng ating lipunan? Dahil monopoly ang gusto nila. 6, the government should stop borrowing from abroad until further notice. Every year our deficit, meaning to say, the difference between what our government earns and what our government spends is growing bigger and bigger. Plus, our foreign debt is growing bigger and bigger. Interest pa lang, hindi na natin nababayaran, principal pa. Kaya nakalibing tayo sa utang. I think that about 5 years ago, every child born in the Philippines was already destined to pay at least, I think, 12,000 pesos as a share in the foreign debt. 7, manage population growth. Ang dami nga kasing Pilipino eh. Hindi naman ganyan kagaling ating gobyerno na mabigyan nila ng sapat na serbisyo itong mga bagong panganak na ito. Mapa-eskwela man lang, mabigyan man lang ng mga training or seminars. Wala namang job opportunities, hindi naman kaya ng gobyerno gumawa ng mga trabaho. Kaya ako, I am the author and at the same time co-sponsor of the RH bill. We must pass the RH bill now, but that is for another speech. Yung ibang mga politiko dapat talaga na-abort yun. Not that the RH bill supports abortion. Not so. That's a lie. But, tarang ibang naglalakad-lakad dyan sa Senado kung minsan, isip ko, kung na-abort kaya eh. I do not want to end this talk on a negative note. There is hope for the Philippines, but only if our leaders do the right things. Economic collapse is not inevitable, but it is possible. But by failing to act boldly and purposively for the general good, the Philippines could fall further behind our fast-growing Asian neighbors. Many experts forecast that the world economy might go through a period of high volatility and slow growth in the year ahead. Magiging masyadong, as the French say, kamsi-kamsa, magiging unpredictable ang economic future of the globe. During the long recovery period, we should focus on rebuilding the country's crumbling infrastructure and on strengthening our weak public institutions so that the Philippines will be stronger, nimbler, ibig sabihin mas adaptable, and more competitive when world growth is restored. The present and future Filipino leaders, and I'm referring to you as future Filipino leaders, should design and implement a bold economic program with a clear understanding that such program requires strong leadership. Strong leadership. Pag sinabi kong ganito, ganito na yun. Tumigil na kayo. Isang imik pa, preso na kayo kaagad. Kasi masyado mahilig dumaldal ang mga Pilipino eh. Dapat minsan lang. We should have strong leadership, a clear roadmap, an effective and competent government, leaders who will work for the welfare of the majority of the people rather than their own welfare, and a credible and well-performing legal system and regulatory framework. Di, ang hirap pala. Ganun pala ka damage ang ating culture. We have a damaged political and economic culture. Paano natin gagawin lahat ito? Dahil ang tagal na natin nagdusa. Hanggang ngayon mukhang wala tayong pag-asa. Nasa sa inyo iyon. I tell you, ladies and gentlemen of Adamson University and your distinguished guests this afternoon, I tell you, to all your questions, my answer is, look into your hearts, for the answer lies there. All that you need to do is to believe in yourselves. Maniwala kang kaya mo, kakayanin mo. Because the poet said, it matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Prove even only to yourself, prove to the Filipinos that you as a Filipino, you are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul. Thank you very much.